folks, Ariel and Burley over here at Nyth, where today I want to update you guys with the results from that soil test. I actually got this like 2 days ago and had to do a little bit more reading and research to be able to explain what everything means to you, so you're getting this video now. So, if you're new here, welcome, and if you want to go back and check, I'll link at the end of this video to where I collected the soil from my garden beds to send it off. And what I'm discussing now is the report I got back on what is in there. And I just wanted to make one note. There was one gentleman who commented all over that video, was very adamant that I did the collection all wrong because I combined soil from different beds, and that will mean my results don't tell me anything because each bed needed tested separately. If I was trying to determine why, like, this bed did really good and that bed did poorly, that would be true. I would need to test both of them separately. But when you're doing a soil test for the garden, which is what was my goal, all of my beds are made out of the same soil, came out of the same area right beside the garden. They've all been fed and treated the same way, you know, the same manure, fertilizers, the same water, the same crops. They each had different ones in them this year, but over the past 5 years that I've been gardening here, they've all had all the different crops rotated through them. So I'm treating it all, even though they are in separate beds, that's basically just so I can walk in between them. I'm treating it all as one garden, and anything I do to add or whatever, you know, nutrients I'm going to do to the whole garden. So that is what I was trying to test. And when you're doing that, you take soil samples from many locations around the entire garden, and that's how you do it. So I just wanted to address that if you guys read that fellow's comments on there. So I got my soil report here. Now, when you get one of these, it can be a bit like getting a lab report on, like, your blood work from a hospital or something. There's a whole bunch of numbers on there, but if somebody tells you your red blood cell count is 100 or 1,000, do most of us even know what that means? Is that good? Is that bad? Is that all right? Is that, like, way high, way low? You know, a whole lot of us don't know. And a soil report can read a little bit like that. You get this report and it says this thing and there's a number, and you think, okay, what does that tell me? That doesn't mean anything to me. So if you're going to learn about soil science, which I highly encourage, because guys, soil is the root of, like, everything. All your food comes from the soil, whether you're a vegetarian or not. You know, even animals are eating either plants or other animals that ate plants, which came out of the soil. So the soil health really affects everything in your life. It also, you know, that's not even to discuss the water filtration and air quality and all of that. So soil health is really important and really fascinating, and I think is worth learning a lot more about. The numbers on this report that I got, and this is from Logan Labs, I'll link down below to them as well. They are a highly reputable company that's been doing soil testing in this country for a long, long time. I think there's instructions for sending soil samples from out of country if you don't have a lab in your area, but there probably is one that's better to send to, you know, if you're somewhere outside of the States. Anyway, the numbers on here that made sense to me, that I knew what they were when I, you know, first looked at the report, because there was something I knew about, was, first of all, pH. Most of us are familiar with pH. It stands for potential hydrogen, but it's a measure of basically how acidic or alkaline something is. So something like lemon juice or battery acid, those things are very acidic. Something like baking soda, etc., is very base. And a neutral pH is considered 7.0, and those numbers are kind of exponential. So 8 is not like 1 more, or 6 1 more in each direction from 7. That's like times 10, so it's exponential as it goes out. Anyway, my soil is a 6.9. That's just slightly off. That's a 0.1 off of being neutral, and often good healthy soils, from what I've read, are actually like 6.4. So I'm very happy with that. That's a good number, and a whole lot of different factors can affect potential hydrogen or your pH. But anyway, that's a pretty good number. I don't have any major issues going on there with it being way acidic or way alkaline, so that's good to know. That was the first number I really recognize on this report and know what it's talking about. Then another one that I really feel like I have a good grasp on is organic matter percent. So organic matter is all the humus, And like somebody said, humus is a bit hard to define what it actually is. We don't seem to really know, but it's kind of like the bits left when most things break down. They're the bits of things that don't break down and that kind of seem to stay there for a while or like forever. And there's a range in there. Some humus does break down every year, some seems to stay. But it's the organic material, it's the things that aren't rocks or minerals and whatever in there that makes your soil light and fluffy. It's what you're getting when you're using compost and such. If you live in warmer areas, you tend to have a lower percent of, so if you think about your whole soil being like a pie, you're going to have a very small slice of that pie that's organic matter generally, because in a warmer area things just break down faster. In cooler areas it tends to be higher. Of course, I live somewhere very cold. I think the general numbers that are thrown out there are something like, if you live in, in the south, in warm areas, you want at least 3% organic matter in your, so if you cut your pie into 100 slices, you want 3 of those little slivers to be organic material. If you live somewhere colder and in the north, you want at least 7%. Now, I live somewhere very cold, and mine is at 11.43, so almost 11.5%. That's a lot of organic material. That number didn't really surprise me, because I know, and you guys have seen videos if you watch videos of my garden, when I go out there, I can easily dig in my soil with my hands. It's loose and crumbly, and just the texture feels really, really nice. So that didn't really surprise me. That's plenty. I'm going to continue to add compost for its other benefits, but I don't have any particular need to try to work to get my humus level up in the soil, because mine is very good. The third number that I felt like I had a pretty good comprehension of, and I did, the other two I kind of, it's actually really hot in here with the fire going. It's very cold outside right now. But this was something I didn't have a good comprehension of before having read this book. There are quite a few books that are good on soil science. I really, really enjoyed reading this one. Steve Solomon's The Intelligent Gardener, Growing Nutrient-Dense Food. I highly recommend reading this one, and on the website that's linked here, he actually has some updates since printing this book to a couple topics that he's, the more further research has slightly changed on. So I'll try to link to all this stuff below if you guys are interested. And there's other great books on soil science, and I highly recommend reading as many as possible. Back to the topic of that, soil is, and the health of it is one of the most important things that we can do. But anyway, the next number is total exchange capacity. This is abbreviated as TC, TEC, TETC, different things. But it's kind of a number of all the other numbers put together of how much nutrients your soil has available to give to plants. And that's affected by multiple factors, and the balance and the amount of humus and all that. But this is kind of like a number that summarizes all of that. It would be like your grade at the whole end of the school year, that you were an A+ student, that's made up of all the different grades you got on everything through the whole year. This is kind of like that. Mine is 19.74. That's pretty high. That's almost 20. That means that my soil has quite a few available nutrients that if a plant's growing and putting its roots out into the soil, it has a lot of nutrients it can take up and use to build its plant, its leaves, its peas, its cauliflower head, whatever the plant is and whatever it's growing. So that's good. Those are like the first 3 numbers on this report, and those I felt like I had some grasp of, and they were all not really surprising to me, but all very much in the good range of healthy soil, and so I'm very happy with that. Now again, like if you live somewhere super warm, there's probably like 0% chance that your soil is going to have 11.5% organic matter, and some of those things are differences in climates. But I do have a lot of humus in my soil. But anyway, your results are going to, I'm sure if you do a soil test, be different than mine. This is just going through mine. Then we've got 4 big minerals in soil: calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, and somewhat sulfur and phosphorus. Now, those are all things plants need in different amounts. The important part seems to be having them in balance. And this is true for human health. people are starting to realize you can't, if you want your strong, healthy bones so you don't develop osteoporosis, you can't just take calcium, because if calcium and magnesium are not in balance, taking excess calcium can actually make your bones worse, because your body needs the magnesium too, and it'll start pulling magnesium out of the bone to balance out all that calcium you're taking. So if you're going to take some of those things in your human body, you need to have those balanced, because the body seems to need to use both of them together. And if one's way high and one's way low, or the other way around, if they're not in, and it doesn't have to be necessarily equal, they're not, but they need to be in the right kind of balance, however much there is, and not completely reversed. And soil is much the same way. For plants to really grow well, some of these things need to be in balance. And the Logan Labs soil report does a handy little percentage calculation for you here. So it tells you that calcium should be 60 to 70%. I've seen some people say up to like 72. And magnesium, these are the two biggest ones because there's the most volume of them in soil usually. Magnesium should be 10 to 20%. I think I've seen some people say the ideal ratio is like 72 to 12, but between the two of them they should add up to about 80% of the stuff in your soil. And my calcium is at 72.05 and my magnesium is at 15.83. So that's pretty good. My magnesium's a hair on the high side, my calcium is nearly perfect, but they're pretty well balanced. And between the two of them, they're making up actually close to 90% of my soil. My soil actually has mostly excesses rather than deficiencies from this report. So that's fairly good. That's not too concerning. My potassium is a bit on the high side. It should be somewhere between 2 to 5%. Mine's 5.1. Sodium is fine. I've got only 0.62. Plants do need a little bit of sodium, which is what you think of as pure table salt. There's lots of other things that are salts, but plants do need a tiny bit to grow, but too much, and it doesn't take much to be too much, is toxic and will poison them. And then other bases is just other stuff, whatever's in the soil that's not those things. So that's all fairly good, fairly well balanced, and so on. Then we've got the actual numbers, and these are in pounds per acre is how they calculate this. I've got, calcium, I've got 5,690 pounds per acre. And again, that's calculated over a full acre. My garden is not a full acre by any means. And magnesium, I've got 750. Potassium, I've got 848. All of those numbers are slightly higher than their recommended desired variety. That's not too big of a deal from my understanding because they're all a little on the high side. I've kind of got plenty of stuff there. And you would think having plenty is always good, but it's not necessarily if you've got, like we just talked about with this balance, if I've got tons and tons of magnesium and not enough potassium, that's a problem because these things do work in balance with each other, it seems. So the fact that mine are all a little on the high side, that seems to be okay because nothing's majorly lacking and deficient. Then what you do with this, and then there's smaller numbers for things that are actually measured in the parts per million, like boron, iron, manganese, copper, zinc, and aluminum. And again, plants need, these are often called trace minerals. Plants need these things to grow and be healthy, and your body does as well, but in very, very small amounts generally, though they can cause very big problems if you haven't got any at all. So, to simplify things, and I do highly recommend reading books like this and multiple other ones on soil science, for this to make a whole lot of sense beyond that, because overall that says, okay, my garden is fairly nutrient dense and fairly healthy, or the soil is. And that's not shocking, because if you could see, even for my very short growing season, I produced quite a few pounds of food this year, and most of my plants looked healthy, they didn't look stressed, they didn't look yellow, and so on. One number you might be curious about that's not on a soil test is nitrogen. Nitrogen changes all the time, like even within minutes it changes. How much is available changes with the moisture levels, the soil and air temperature and all of that. So that's something that's not really measured, but you can kind of calculate it from the percent of organic matter, because organic matter kind of releases nitrogen into the soil. And I have plenty of organic matter, so I should have plenty of nitrogen, though it doesn't release well when it's very cold, and of course my soil is very cold, and that's partly why I use my diluted urine as a fertilizer, especially when things are getting going in the spring, because that is high in nitrogen, and plants need nitrogen to get going, and because my soil is not warm in the spring, that's helpful, because even though there's plenty of nitrogen in the soil, it's not really available to the plants at those temperatures to get them going. So that's just a note about nitrogen, which is not on here. So, Mr. Steve Solomon, who wrote this book, and his partner, Erica Reinheimer, I might be butchering her last name, I'm sorry, they've made a really nice soil worksheet that makes it very handy to do the math on this. So this is what my, report looks like from Logan Labs. They generally email it to you, and you can print it out so you have a copy to reference. And this is the soil worksheet, and it's really handily lined up for Logan Labs to, all the things are basically in the same order and such. So you can go in through here and fill in what your results were on, sulfur, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, potassium, etc. right on down the list. And then it's got helpful little instructions right on there and says, for phosphorus, you want phosphorus to be about the same, equal to potassium, which is K. So it says P should equal K. That's our target level. And so then you've got to just do some basic math here. This is not complicated. It's just like addition and subtraction, a little bit of multiplication. Very basic math. You don't need a math degree to do any of this. So I just look at my phosphorus level is this, my potassium level is this. What is the difference? I actually, if I want those to be the same, that's one of the major things that for me is a little out of balance. I have more potassium and less phosphorus, so my soil would probably be a little healthier if I could add some phosphorus. And you can easily do the math right here, and it tells you you'd want to add this many pounds per acre. And there's some easy math to figure out. Pounds per acre you can divide to being like ounces per square foot, because most of us are gardening with amounts that, if you're doing a veggie garden, amounts that are square feet, not hundreds of acres. My garden, for instance, the actual bed space inside my concrete blocks, not counting the paths and such, is about 621 square feet of soil inside the garden bed. So I'm working, with that much space. There is a way to get this filled out for you if you don't want to do any of that. The Erica lady who helped write that book has a website called growabundant.com, I believe, and they have a calculator that will do all this. It's a subscription you can either pay for just like running a single test, or for an annual subscription so you could run as many different tests as you want. And it'll let you easily just take your soil report that you got, if you don't want to do any of the thinking or any of the math or any of that, and type in each number that you got for each of these and how many square feet your garden is, and it will print you out a recommendation list of what what would be recommended to make your soil more ideal. I did the math myself kind of just for fun. A whole lot of my things I have excesses on. The only real ones I could use a little more of are a little more sulfur, a little more phosphorus, because that's a bit out of balance with my potassium. A little, and these again get to tiny amounts, a little bit more boron, slightly more copper, and some more zinc. Copper is one that too much copper in soil can be very, very toxic to the soil and plant microbe life, but plants do need a little bit of copper to form themselves, and your body needs a little bit of copper, though again to humans it can be very toxic in high amounts. But you do need a tiny bit, and it seems to be one of those trace minerals that really improves the flavor of veggies as well as their nutrition. So I did the math on all that, and then there's second page to that says, okay, so if your math here told you need 463 more pounds per acre of phosphorus, if your garden's only 621 square feet, here's how many ounces that would be, and here's things that would contain that. So you could do all that, or you can get them to do that math, because that starts getting a little bit complicated. Just to figure out, because there's different percentages and amounts of those minerals and such you might need in different fertilizers, depending whether you're going to use compost or some kind of ground rock, or, this kind of animal manure, that kind of animal manure. Anyway, they all have different amounts. So it can be really handy to have a calculator just do the math for you. So I did that too. And it told me, and again, my garden's pretty well balanced. The things that could maybe help it be a little better would be if I would add, they generally recommend kelp kind of across the board, because kelp, and it's partly why I use it in my cooking, has so many, basically has all the trace minerals in. And so just adding some powdered kelp to your garden soil can make sure you have plenty of all those tiny little things that aren't even measured on a soil report like this. So that's kind of an across the board recommendation, that probably getting your micronutrients up by adding kelp to your soil can be helpful. But then the things that are beyond that, my specific garden area, my 621 square feet of soil, and all this is based on the top 6 inches, because that's generally what's called a furrow slice. If you took a big furrow down a big field, that's how much soil you'd be moving around. That's where the majority, of course there are things that root deeper, but the majority of the plant's root and veggies rooting activity goes on, and so on. So that's kind of the amounts we're dealing with. So for my garden, they're telling me it would benefit from about 4 more pounds of gypsum, 23 ounces of copper. That's actually a biomin copper, and that's only part of that. Those ounces are actually copper. 5 ounces of borax, and 3 ounces of zinc, zinc sulfate. That's those are pretty small amounts. Clearly, we're talking in the single ounces, and I have a somewhat substantial garden that produces me a whole lot of food. All of these things can be found. There's various sites. I was able to find all of the things recommended for my garden on Amazon. I am not going to do anything more with this report at the moment this year, because my garden's frozen solid now. But I might consider, I've got to think about it through the winter, I might consider trying to add a little bit of some of those things in the spring, right before I'm planting my veggies. And when you're dealing with like ounces across hundreds of square feet, for a lot of things, if they're water soluble, I believe the easiest way to do that is dissolve them into a spray bottle, and then kind of spritz the spray bottle and go around all your garden beds till it's out. That's about the easiest way to distribute it, because you can't really like scatter or pour ounces across hundreds of square feet very evenly. Anyway, so there's a few things there I could probably do that would help improve my soil nutrition, which improves my veggie nutrition. Of course, the whole point in growing vegetables for me is to have highly nutritious food to feed my body. And again, soil science is just fascinating. Plants will grow in a whole lot of conditions, a little bit like people. And there are levels of all these nutrients in the soil that are considered sufficient. So that's kind of like a baseline. This is often how things are measured in pet foods and stuff too. Like, if you're going to grow corn on this big field, it needs at least this many pounds per acre of calcium, or the corn won't grow. It just simply isn't going to come out of the ground. If you have this much, it will grow. Now, as you probably can easily imagine, that's not necessarily, that doesn't mean you have the healthiest corn possible. Think about this for humans. You can put humans in a prison somewhere, in a concentration camp, whatever, and give them just a tiny bit of broth with 1 speck of meat in it and a little crumb of rotten bread, and they will continue to live for a while. So that's sufficient. They're not dead. You haven't died, but you're certainly not healthy and thriving. And I don't want concentration camp plants in my garden. I want healthy, thriving ones. So I don't want just the minimum amount of things needed to keep them just alive and not dead. I want them to be growing and thriving and putting lots and lots of nutrients into my food that I'm going to eat. So that's why I wanted to test this and be aware of that, because the more nutrient dense you can get your food, it seems like from everything we know, the healthier you are. When we eat a lot of things that don't have much nutrition in them, like I grow and love potatoes, but a lot of potatoes grown commercially, and a lot of other food grown commercially, even organic and such, sadly, is growing from very depleted soils that do not have a lot of these nutrients in them. So it still makes, let's say, a potato. And there's lots of starches, there's not as many proteins, there's not as many minerals. It still looks the same on the outside. You look and you say, oh, here's a potato, and then here's a potato from my garden, and they might look identical. But the one has a lot more carbohydrates and starches, and so when you eat it, it makes you feel full temporarily, but then your body knows, I'm still missing this nutrient and this, so it tells you, I'm hungry, eat more, hoping to get those things from something that you eat. And that seems to be from a lot of research, part of the problem with the obesity epidemic is that their bodies are genuinely starving for nutrients, and that's why it's not just a lack of self-control. I mean, that can be in play there, but their body's genuinely saying, I need these nutrients, I'm not getting them, eat something else, maybe I'll get it there. But if we can have those nutrients in the food, then you don't have that reaction. You feel full and you're satisfied, and your body's like, all good for now. I mean, we'll need more in a few hours or tomorrow or whatever, but good for now. You know, you're not hungry anymore. You don't have an appetite to continue eating. So that's why some of this stuff is important, because I want my soil to be well nourished so I can have my plants well nourished so that I can be well nourished. And there's so much to learn. I mean, I can't even, possibly this video is going to get way too long, go into all the details of everything I've learned about soil science, and there's a whole lot more, and I think it's a fascinating topic, and I highly encourage every single person to learn more about it, because I think it's one of the biggest things that affects the health of not just us and our veggie gardens, but everything around us, the trees and the bushes and the birds and the bees, and therefore the whole planet. So this stuff is really exciting. But overall, that's kind of the summary of my garden soil report. I'm overall very happy with the results. I think that basically tells me just keep doing what I'm doing. There's a couple of those kind of trace minerals that I might add a little bit more of, because they don't seem to be in particular abundance in my soil in this area, to see if I can get my veggies just a little bigger and sweeter and tastier and richer and more nutrient dense. But overall, I'm doing pretty well, and that's exciting. So that is the update on my soil report. I think if you guys garden, and if you have an interest in growing food, if you don't, I encourage you to have an interest in producing food. That's one of the biggest things anybody can do for their own mental health and enjoyment and physical health and nutrition and saving the planet, if you want to look at it that way, because every bit of food you produce doesn't have to come the average 1,500 miles from somewhere else to get to your door. But if you're going to garden, it's worth trying to do it really well, I think. And this is not to, if you don't have time and don't have energy and money and whatever to send off for a soil report right now, by all means grow stuff anyway. But if you can, let's try to grow the best stuff we can. And that is, that's kind of my goal here. And so I want to share what I'm learning with you guys and encourage you guys to learn more about that. Because over time, just like if there's not enough of this or that mineral, or if they're way out of balance in your soil, your plants will look unhealthy. When plants are unhealthy and they're stressed, then they tend to be more prone to getting diseases and getting eaten by pests. The best, people ask me all the time, what do you do for pest control here? The number one thing is I live somewhere really cold where bugs freeze most of the time. Number two thing is I try to keep really healthy plants, not my concentration camp, just barely alive plants, but my healthy, thriving, vigorous plants. And bugs just don't attack those nearly as much. I have very, very few bug issues, hardly ever. And over the years, I'd say I've gotten less and less bug issues all the time, as I think I've built my soil up and got it stronger and healthier, which has given me stronger and healthier plants. So many, many reasons to want to learn about soil health and to know what's going on in your garden. And happy gardening next year, if you're in a position like me where gardening's pretty much froze up for the year, or a whole lot of you guys are in warmer areas where the best prime gardening season might just be starting because it's finally cooled down enough for plants to grow. And if you're somewhere in between, you can probably grow all the stuff I grow in the summer out here in the middle of your winter, because my summers are often the same temperature as winters in a lot of areas. So anyway, happy gardening, whether you're doing that in the near future or not for the next year, and hopefully that's fascinating. And I know I just barely touched on a whole bunch of things there, but hopefully that encourages you to maybe get inspired to go check out more stuff. And I will try to link to all of these resources down below that I am aware of. A lot of this stuff is available for free online or buy books. I love to read. And so on, and just educate yourself about this topic. And happy growing nutrient-dense food to everybody out there. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time watching these videos. Hopefully you found something beautiful, educational, interesting, peaceful, relaxing, or useful while you are here. If so, find more videos here, subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and if you like what you found here, feel free to like and share away so that others can benefit as well. You all have a wonderful day.